Just want to read to you from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 8, verse 26. Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. An angel of the Lord said to Philip, "Get ready and go south to the road that goes from Jerusalem to Gaza. Now, this road is not used nowadays." So Philip got ready and went. Now, an Ethiopian eunuch, who was an important official in charge of the treasury of the Queen of Ethiopia, was on his way home. He had been to Jerusalem to worship God and was going back home in his carriage. As he rode along, he was reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And the Holy Spirit said to Philip, "Go over to that carriage and stay close to it." And Philip ran over and heard him reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And he asked him, "Do you understand what you're reading?" The official replied, "How can I understand unless someone explains it to me?" And he invited Philip to climb up and sit in the carriage with him. The passage of scripture he was reading was this: "Like a sheep that is taken to be slaughtered, like a lamb that makes no sound when its wool is cut off, he did not say a word. He was humiliated, and justice was denied him. No one was able to tell about his descendants, because his life on earth had come to an end." And the official asked Philip, "Tell me, of whom is the prophet saying this? Of himself or of someone else?" Then Philip began to speak. Starting from this passage of scripture, he told him the good news about Jesus. And as they travelled down the road, they came to a place where there was some water. And the official said, "Here is some water. What is to keep me from being baptized?" The official ordered the carriage to stop, and both Philip and the official went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. And when they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord took Philip away. The official did not see him again, but continued on his way, full of joy. This is a great, I've always thought it's a great passage, very cryptic, isn't it? Great story. I've got this vision of this picture, of this chariot going along here. This guy, Ethiopian high official, he's sort of G7 league, he would have been, And so think 4x4 black glass air conditioning sort of thing of those days. And he is going along, and then Philip is sent down there to talk to him. He gets in, he tells him the story of Jesus, and then the guy's baptized. This is a hugely cryptic story, but it is crucial to the history of Christianity. We often think about St. Paul bringing the gospel to Europe. This guy took the gospel to Africa. That is a big step in the mission of the church. I also think it's encouraging because this is not, as most of the rest of the Acts of the Apostles, it's not something done by St. Peter, that's the first half of Acts, and it's not something done by St. Paul, that's the second half of Acts. It's just done by Philip, who's a common to garden apostle, which is good for us, isn't it? But it might be a major missionary step. I just want to share with you a few thoughts which came to me as I was reading it, which are things I've often thought, and you think anyway, but really come out of this. And it just started off very simply when it says, and an angel sent Philip down to this road. Now, it says it's not used anymore. It's a desert road. Another translation says it went to Gaza, which was abandoned. In other words, it's a road that nobody went on very much. Philip is taken out of a place, he'd been part of the preaching ministry on the coastal strip where everybody was, where the water was, where the agriculture were, where the cities were, but not in the desert. Nobody went in the desert except specialised caravans and specialised people like the Ethiopian eunuch could afford to do that and have the resources and all that sort of thing. The word that comes to mind is that word from that book by Scott Peck, A Road Less Travelled. He took him onto a road less travelled. And I just want to share that thought with you which I think is a stimulating idea, has been to me over the years, that to follow Jesus, to follow a road less travelled. He went down, there wasn't anybody there except the odd Ethiopian eunuch, you know. Think about Jesus when he's returning from the north, going back into the main part of Judea, and he goes through Samaria. No Orthodox Jew goes through Samaria. He takes a road less travelled right through Samaria, because you could become made impure by people you met or things you touched. Nobody went there, but he went there, and he meets the woman by the well, and there is one of the eternal conversations in the world that we have in St. John's Gospel about the water of life. Because, why? There's an opportunity that comes because he is taking a road less travelled. And either literally or metaphorically, that's the same with all these great people of the Bible. I mean, Abraham, who sets off with his wife and his relations and his camels and his, cooking pots and everything, and he's going on a road. He doesn't even know where he's going. Who does that? Nobody does that. And Moses, who before Moses has taken a road across the Red Sea and across the desert with 600,000 people who are recalcitrant? What sort of road is that? Or Elijah, and then in the New Testament, what other fisherman has done and walked the road that St. Peter walked? What other Pharisee has walked the road that Paul walked? To be the men and women of God, we walk a road less travelled. Or do we? I'm just thinking about the contrast between how conventional I often am and how Christianity becomes not a road less travelled, but a road which is comfortable for a group of people who we know, that we can sing the same songs with, we can read the same stuff with, we can meet with, we can drink the same coffee with. Very often chapel becomes a comfortable subculture, doesn't it? And doesn't seem like a road less travelled. In fact, we are very nervous about being on our own. We want people to be around us. We want people to agree with us. We want people to like us. That's especially true if you're a minister. But you think about a life which involves forgiveness rather than vengeance. I mean, that's a strange way of living, a new way of living, a radical way of living. A life that is full of unconditional hospitality. Wow, that is risky, and that is not easy. That's not the way most people go, is it? Or a life that is full of trust and peace rather than angst and stress. That is a very different sort of road. Or a road that involves guidance rather than finding your way, And above all, a life which is built around the fact that we are not alone, but we have Jesus. Those things, even if it's a cup of coffee or conversation or your whole life, that is not what most people do. That is not the way most people go. And it means that you can be isolated and uncomfortable, and you won't like it, and it's challenging, and most people don't do it because it's not easy. Desert roads are not easy. And for the church, in the last 50 years, in the period of when I've been in the church actively, the church has found this very difficult and doesn't like it. It doesn't like travelling a road less travelled. It wants to travel the road that everybody else in society is travelling. When it came to Sunday and Sunday trading, we got used to that, didn't we? When it got to tithing and generosity, we got used to not doing that. And then the whole is of marriage and sexuality and cohabitation. Whatever the biblical side of it is, whatever we're supposed to believe about it, the big message from the church at the moment is we don't want to walk on a road which is less travelled. We want to walk with everybody else, so they won't give us any credence anymore. So there's a real challenge to be different, if you like. But I think it's very interesting. Jesus says, about the narrow way, that people might not come with you. Are we ready for that? But isn't that interesting? Isn't that stimulating? Who wants to just live on the equivalent in life of the M5? That doesn't mean that we are just called to be different because we're told to be tricky. Lots of people are different, aren't they? Lots of people have their things. Some people spend their whole life training to climb a mountain. Well, that's great. Some people spend their entire lives, studying the life cycle of a very small seashell. Well, that's great. Lots of people are unusual. Lots of people, and some of you, will be doing things which are unusual, a different life path. And some people are very interesting, and some people are complete nutters. But the point is that that Philip doesn't go out into the desert because he needs some personal space. He doesn't go out there because he's studying sand dunes. He goes out there because the Lord sends him out there. We are called to take a road that the Lord leads us on. And if people travel it with us, that's great. And if they don't, we carry on. We are not just trying to be tricky. And too often in my lifetime, the church and Christians have stood out because they're difficult, because they're tricky, because they're awkward, because they have sort of late Victorian social values. We don't do that. Why not? Well, we never have. Sort of thing. And people think, well, why are you like that? We've got no reason for it. We're just being difficult. Makes us stand out, But Philip is not like that. Philip is called to go there. Philip is called to go there. And we need to be hearing what God is saying. One of the trickiest things I found on big moorland areas, I was thinking particularly of Kinder Scout. Anybody been on Kinder Scout, bottom of the Pennines, big area, but also in parts of Dartmoor, is where you are looking for a faint path across moorland. There's lots of other patterns. There's sheep paths, there's bits of patterns that you can see in the bracken, in the gorse, and bits of bare earth. And it's a real knack to be able to see roughly where, is that a path or is that not a path? I've made lots of mistakes, but over the years you get the knack of it, and I usually get it right. I think with spirituality, wanting to know where God is leading us, the way through, it takes time, it takes nuance. You get a feel of when the Lord is saying, yeah, go in this way. And you say, well, nobody else has been there, there's hardly any, and nobody's really, I can't see where it's worn, Anybody can see where it's worn, but when it's not worn, because it's not much used, he says, that is the way. We need to hear this, don't we? I want to say, that's it. So it's a spiritual thing. Go in the way. And then whether there's a lot of other people or not, is neither here nor there, is it? Going north from Bath, there's a Roman road that runs up through to Leicester and then up to York. It's virtually dead straight. The Romans were good at that sort of thing, weren't they? But some parts of it, if you look on the Ordnance Survey map, are A roads. And some parts are B roads. And some parts are minor roads. And some parts are footpaths. If the Lord says, this is the way, go on it, then sometimes there'll be lots of other people. There were in Jesus' time. At other times, there aren't anybody. And you're looking for the footprints. The important thing is to be in the right way and not panic when nobody else is going that way. Not being difficult, but being focused. And when things don't work out with other people, going on the way rather than just going with them. It's extraordinary, isn't it, in society today? Everything is about individualism. But all the pressure from the media, the social media, and our peer groups are to conform. We're all supposed to be individuals, but we're all supposed to belong to a group who eat that or do that or go there or have that opinion or vote that way or something. There's enormous pressure. And we get that pressure as well. And it's easy to go with it. There's places on that road going north from Bath, and I've been on it, where you're going along a B road, dead straight, and then it says bend, and it goes right, and you can see that the Roman road goes on through a gate, up a bridle path, where nobody is going. That is the point where we need to go on. I'm thinking, well, I better go right with everybody else. Yeah, but you just go on. It's not that you need to worry about the fact that there's other people with you. A lot of things that Jesus did, there was a lot of other people doing it. He didn't say, I'm not going to that wedding. There's a lot of people there. If they were doing what he wanted, that's fine. If they weren't, he went and did something else. He said something else. That's like that in the conversation. See where the Lord's taken us, whether there's a lot of people going there or not. The other week I had some family with us and we spent a couple of hours on Godrivi, which we were looking over. There was a lot of people. There was a lovely morning on a Saturday morning. Everybody's looking over and waving at the G7 on the other side of the bay. You know, it was great stuff. You could almost see Boris paddling over there, sort of thing. But it was a lovely day, and there was lots of people there on the National Trust, lots of people parking, lots of camper vans, lots of people in the sea. It was very warm, it was lovely. And we walked around the end, and we came back across the top of the cliffs in front of the main car park, and there was all those camper vans and big things you have there. And in front of them, there was a huge line of people who'd gone out their cars and were sitting in their garden seats, you know, in pairs or in little groups, and they had their coffee or their wine. They all had their small uncontrollable dogs, and you know, and they were all there. And I'm walking across the front of them, and they're all there sitting there, sleeping or talking, wasn't it? And we got to the end, and I think it was my daughter said to me after we were out of earshot, "That'll be what you'll be doing, Dad, next week." And I said, I am not going to be doing that. But, you know, you could easily say that Christianity is saying, I don't want to be there. I want to be doing something more interesting. Well, I actually do want to be something more interesting than that. But there have been a few days in my life which stand out when I've decided on a beach day, when I spent the entire day in a deck chair reading a paper or paddling or making sandcastles. They were a great blessing. That was a good thing to do, but I'm not going to line up there in their chairs drinking tea, going to sleep and marinating under the sun, because I think that's the right thing for me to do, not because I want to be different. On the same day, you see, at the back of the car park at the National Trust there was a large army radar station with big green lorries and a massive great thing in this radar, because it would have been an air exclusion zone. And they were inside a fence and they were all wearing cam cream and all that stuff, you know. That's much more interesting. That is, these are different people. They'd like to be eating ice cream. They'd like to be paddling. They got the same sunshine as we have, but they have a different task. There's not many people manning an army radar station, but that is the task. They're not saying, "Ooh, I don't think we should be dressed like this. Look, they're all in their shorts." If we are called to something different, we are called to something, a road less travelled. Where is Jesus going to take us? What was he leading us to? An interesting thought. Because when we travel, as Philip did, that road less travel, it will lead us. Well, where does it lead us? It leads us, using another phrase, into a life less ordinary. Because think of the opportunities that man had because he was in a strange place. He could have been, in Jerusalem, he could have been in Antioch, he could have been all that place, cast of thousands, but he wouldn't have met this guy, would he? It wouldn't have been an opportunity. If I'm prepared to live a life which has a different sort of conversation, a different way, if I'm prepared to say for instance, in a conversation, we're going along and having a good chat with everybody, and then somebody says something that is not right, and the conversation moves in that running somebody down, or something, doubt or scepticism or cynicism, and you then say, "This is why I part company," you see, and there I say, "No, I don't agree with that. That's not right." You see, there's a divergence there. But where would that take you? To take you to an argument or an interesting conversation or a disclosure or something, What about as a church, if when we're involved with Maisie Day, in days gone by, we were grumpy. We closed the whole place down in Maisie Day because we didn't like it. But now we open it. And on a normal year, they say, well, we could do this and this. Yeah. We are running this together. But then the council says, could we have some fortune telling on the front? And we say, no, we can't do fortune telling on the front, because then you see the road less travelled is going away from what everybody else is thinking. But that brings you new opportunities, new debate, new argument, new interest. The different road takes you into a different place, or we're in a church council. We're all discussing where we could give our money to various charities. And that's interesting. And then the meeting says, but we're very hard up. We should reduce the percentage of money we give away. And that is absolutely wrong. And if you say that is wrong, what an interesting dialogue that will be. That road will take you somewhere else. And that's all right, isn't it? Get off the M5. See where Jesus is taking you. Don't live on some kind of spiritual sat-nav. Find an interesting lane that Jesus is taking you up, And then you have a life less ordinary. Who wants to live an ordinary life? If you do, just switch off at this point. It doesn't work for me. And you see, he meets this guy. If he hadn't been there, he wouldn't have met him. This important guy in this chariot, you see. What an opportunity. And then he says, it's like a gateway opening, isn't it? He says, go over and stay by the chariot. I've always thought that's really amusing. How do you go over and stay by a chariot that's moving along with horses and all that? He's not going to be on his own. He's an important guy. He's security. He's got a few guards. He's got hangers on, all sorts of things, The only way you can do it is you run over and run alongside it. So I've got this vision of him. The guy's up there in the cool with a sort of, somebody sort of keeping him cool. He's reading up there. And he's running alongside this in the dirt, hot and sweaty. It's not much of an opportunity, but it's just a chink of opportunity. That Jesus just gives us a little opening. It's a little opening for something different, something less ordinary, something less normal, somebody you meet you wouldn't have met, a conversation that happened that you weren't going to happen, and just at a glance, somebody says something, drops something, somebody needs something, there's a funny bit on the end of an email, or whatever, and you think, gosh, if I hadn't been here, I wouldn't have seen it. Earlier in the week I was in Boots getting a few things, so we lined up, socially distanced, masks, whatever. 2 little girls in front of me with their mum. They were amazing. They must have been about 3.5, and they must have been identical twins. Sweet little girls. They're wearing the same sparkly sandals. They're wearing the same pinafore dresses. They got the same bunches, and they're holding hands. Oh, and I'm not into that, but they were lovely. And and they were great, and their mum got something from the lady in Boots, and when I got to, and they walking slowly away, and she said, yes, she's an extra nice lady, and I said to her, aren't they brilliant, those 2 little kids, aren't they wonderful? And she looked over there and she said, yeah, they are, aren't they? And we had a moment, just a moment, was just a little natch. I'm not telling her about Jesus and giving her a tract. I just said, it's just a start, isn't it? It's an opening. And it's not always easy, those openings, is it? When somebody comes back to you and say, well, what do you think? Oh, no. And that sort of thing. But if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't done it, it wouldn't work. Because you're doing something slightly different, there is an opening, a doorway, something in your relationships or in your life that is different to just walking up and down the prom. Because I'm somewhere else. I'm not meeting the same people, doing the same things all the time. And it can be difficult. I've told you before, when I worked for the army, sometimes we would go running, not running as in competition running, but running in a squad of, say, 50 men in threes, in boots, and you're running, And it's like running alongside the chariot. And I remember one of these soldiers saying to me after we'd been out for about half an hour, hey, Padre, what are you doing out here? Now, it's not much of an opening, is it? But it's a start. He didn't tell me how I can become a Christian. He just said, what are you doing out here? But the point was, if I hadn't been fit enough to be running along, I wouldn't have been able to answer him. I would have been going, And so it's with Philip as well. This guy is reading for the prophet Isaiah. He takes the opportunity. He says, do you know what he's saying? Do you know what you're reading? And this guy says, how am I going to know what I'm reading unless somebody tells me? Oh, by the way, do you want to hop up in there and tell me? You see, one thing leads to another. If I hadn't been in that coffee shop, I wouldn't have met that person, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity. If we hadn't said, well, let's open the church up for this, you don't know who's going to turn up. We'd never have met that person, would we? Those opportunities, the way it comes out, it's a new thing. He lets him in. And then he says, he gets up in the chariot. That's a real problem with opportunities and gateways that Jesus gives you to be living a life less ordinary. You don't know where it's going to go, do you? Where is this chariot going? It's going to Ethiopia. How do I get back? It's the person who asks you something and you haven't got time. It's the conversation you have on the bus. And you need to get off. The conversation you could have here at the end of the service when you need to get home. But the opportunity comes and you take it. And he takes it. One thing leads to another. Isn't that exciting? That's serendipity. It's not an ordinary day. It's not an ordinary week. For this church, it's not going to be an ordinary autumn, harvest and all that. So he has something less ordinary. And then, of course, after he spoke to her about it, we get another doorway. And he says, because presumably Philip says, you believe in Jesus and are baptized. The guy who is already a Jew in faith says, I believe this, I go for this, I believe in Jesus. All I need then is to be baptized. All I need is some water. What have you not got in the desert? Oh, look, he says, there's some water. What is to stop me from being baptized? And there's another gateway. And he says, can I be baptized? And Philip thinks, you haven't done the Alpha course. But there's the opportunity there. And he goes down in the water and they both get wet and he's baptized. And then Philip is zoomed out. And the guy goes back to Ethiopia drying off in his chariot, full of joy. What a good solution. What a good ending that is, isn't it? And all those is because Philip has not been there and not taken the opportunity. There was one or two occasions when I was a student that I remember going out, this has been recorded so I've got to be careful, but going out for a few beers and with the students, and you would go somewhere, perhaps you went for a few beers and then in the pub you met somebody who was going to a party. Don't know where it was, but anyway, go to the party. So you abandon having a few beers and you go off to this party. You traipse across town and you find that it wasn't there. But you met somebody who knew where it was. And in the end, you finished up at 1 o'clock in the morning in somebody else's party, full of smoke and darkness, having a great conversation about the meaning of life and the size of the universe, when you could have gone home for your Horlicks. Do you want a life lost ordinary? What good solutions. I just finished by, just got to say this. This whole life less ordinary, this road less travelled, it's about Jesus. Because at the core of it, he preaches the good news about Jesus. Isaiah is talking about Jesus. He talks about the good news. In fact, the Greek says he preached to him Jesus. It was good news. Without Jesus, there isn't any of this at all. What is the centre? The band sung it for us, didn't they? When the music fades, it's all about you. It's all about Jesus. That is the centre of it. It has been unpopular in recent years to say something like, see in a conversation if you can bring it round to talking about Jesus. Now, I know they used to make videos of that sort of thing that were really naff. But why shouldn't you bring a conversation round to Jesus? And starting from the passage, which is not an easy passage, he preached to him the good news of Jesus. Any conversation you have with anybody in this church this morning on the way out that lasts more than 2.5 minutes, wouldn't it be good if either directly or indirectly involved Jesus? Not just like the epilogue, not like the God slot that used to have in youth fellowships, now we're going to do the God bit. Not cringy, but if Jesus is in stuff, if he is in life, he is in your life, that's what you want to go on about. And if he's in an environment or in politics or in your family or your health, he's going to come up, isn't he? And we will speak the good news of Jesus because it is good news. What we talk about is what we're enthusiastic about. Remember travelling once with a group of people going to London to organise a Christian event, and there was 4 of us in this car. We drove the whole from Plymouth to London on the A303 route, and I started to say to them, this is interesting here, and I told them what rock they were driving over. being a geologist. And from then on, there was this monologue of me telling them, oh, that's the green sand, that's the chalk, that's the thing. And they're all, because that was interesting to me. So if you're really interested in Jesus, if you are walking a road less travelled with Jesus, he's going to be the one you're talking about. And you'll start with the cross. What is Isaiah talking about? The cross and what Jesus has done. You don't start with believe in Jesus and you'll be happy. He starts with the cross and Jesus' sacrifice for us. And he preached to him Jesus. Not what Jesus said, not Christianity, not the Ten Commandments, not a moral code, not a lifestyle decision, not a way of doing things, not the church, because they hadn't invented it yet. Neither was it all about social justice, caring for my neighbour, helping the poor, or saving the planet. This is about Jesus, or it's not about anything. He's taken on a road less travelled. He's given a series of doorways that he walks through. The result is amazing. But it's about Jesus. Personally. And I would say in all the ups and downs of a road quite less travelled of 40 years, at the end of the day it's about Jesus. Or it's about nothing. So, the band are going to play for us, and they're going to play a song about the cross, really, because you need to come back to Jesus today. I don't want you to go home today thinking, oh, the sermon was about this or that, you know, and so I should do this and this and this and this. There may be some good stuff there for you. I just feel this morning it was about Jesus. And just come back to that. And the rest of it will work. Because it was Jesus, wasn't it, who said immortally on the beach with those first disciples, follow me. Follow me. That's where the road less travelled starts. Peter had no idea where he was going. Peter had no idea that a life less ordinary than fishing was his. But Jesus began, follow me. It's his footsteps that we follow. Let's stand together, shall we? And come back to the centre of things. And set our course on this road less travelled with Jesus.